Good afternoon. And this is April 20th, so this is Earth Day. I want to thank you all for taking time to join us on this very first digital Chancellor's Town Hall. This, of course, is a grand experiment, as all of our lives are really experiments at this point in time, given all the different changes that are happening as a result of the pandemic. I'm really excited about this hour that is ahead. It's an hour to reflect on some of the biggest challenges and opportunities that we are experiencing as a result of COVID-19 and the physical distancing at DU and beyond. I think we've got a really interesting program kind of lined up for you. I'm joined today with 5 outstanding community members, students, faculty, and staff, who I know will have an interesting and distinct experiences to share with all of us. So let me first briefly introduce them, and they're going to wave so you know the name with the face. Ann DePrince, Director of DU's Center for Community Engagement to Advance Scholarship and Learning, very fondly remembered as Cecil, and Professor of Psychology here at the University of Denver. She's one of DU's best champions for our public good vision, both through her research and through her teaching. And she shares that research with the public often. And in particular, she is well known in the national media right now on her research around domestic violence, which of course is on the rise as a result of our physical distancing. Alex Kedah is a junior right now. He's in the class of 2021. He's a finance major, and he's well known because he's part of our men's soccer team. He's also a board member of the Student Athletic Advisory Committee. Great news about Alex. He plans to stay at DU for his master's degree, and I love that. And he will continue to play soccer during his 5th year of eligibility. So we're pleased to have Alex with us. Mary Kudadzi is another junior, class of 2021. She is a computer science major, and she serves on the Pioneer Leadership Program Scholars Board. So she's a PLPer. And she's president of DU's Joint Council, which represents our undergraduate affinity groups. Nikki Latino is the Associate Vice Chancellor for Campus Life and Inclusive Excellence, commonly known as CLE. Nikki earned her master's degree and her PhD at DU, so she's a double alum. We love that about Nikki. She got started here actually as a graduate resident director in one of our residence halls, JMAC, and then interned for our Center for Multicultural Excellence. So Nikki, it's great to have you here. And then finally, Tom Romero. Tom is an associate professor in the Sturm College of Law, but he's also assistant provost for inclusive excellence and research and curriculum initiatives, and faculty director of iRise. This is DU's Interdisciplinary Research Institute for the Study of Inequality. Now, the great thing about Tom is he's an undergraduate alum of DU back in 1995. So he returned now as a tenured faculty member in 2010. I think you'll agree with me, we've got some really interesting students, faculty, and staff here to join us, and I know that their experiences are going to be a lot of fun to share and enlightening for that matter. I'm going to turn to them in just a minute, but I'm going to just spend a few minutes kind of giving some few remarks just to get us going on our town hall meeting, and then we'll come and explore their experiences a little bit more. So there's just no question about it that these are unbelievable times that we find ourselves in. I can't help but think, you know, these are the best of times and the worst of times for us. Change is happening so rapidly, and decisions have to be made so quickly. What I marvel in, I think, is the fact that we are literally making history minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. It is, of course, inspiring and awesome and scary at the same time. I can't tell you, though, how proud I am of our faculty, staff, and students, because they've just done an amazing job at pivoting to this online learning environment. I know the faculty have spent hours preparing for their classes to move them over onto Zoom or in asynchronous learning. I know our students have had to make a big shift in going from face-to-face to online classes, and our staff have worked tirelessly to support both of them, as they always do. They make it seem easy, but far be it. We know that it is incredibly hard. We're social animals. We crave physical and social proximity, and distance is really challenging on so many different levels. We all are learning and absorbing information so differently. It's happened so fast. If you just stop and think about it for a minute, it was way back in March 11th when the campus announced that we were going to be shifting to online classes in the spring quarter, and we moved all the online finals for winter quarter online, or all the final exams of winter quarter online. The stay-at-home order that the governor gave on March 23rd left us no choice but to clear our campus of all but essential personnel. And we asked the students, we encouraged the students to go home, and only the students that were unable to leave have stayed with us. And so we're now in week 4. I can't believe it's week 4 already of our spring quarter, entirely online. And of course, yes, there are many financial impacts of lost revenue and expenses. And of course, we just don't know what that future will bring. But I want this to be very clear to everyone who is listening. We are fine as a university, and we will be fine. We'll be stronger as a result of this experience. But I can't thank everyone for making the enormous contributions that they have made over the last several weeks. Now, I want you to also know that while many universities have gone forward and canceled commencement, and even some of them have moved their summer school to entirely online, University of Denver has not done that. Now, part of the reason is commencement comes in June, but in fact, we haven't canceled commencement. We are exploring every possible way to have some kind of commencement ceremony for our seniors, because we know that they have been hit incredibly hard by this change. They've lost out on that very special moment of their undergraduate time during that spring quarter, and we'd love to have and celebrate with them just a bit. We do have a really wonderful class of 2024 shaping up that will be joining us in the fall. Can't promise exactly what fall will look like, but it is my hope and my expectation at the moment that we will be face-to-face in some manner or another. Now, all the decisions that had to be made were made, I think, with some very clear and important principles in mind, and I'd like to share those with you so that you understand that these decisions, while not easy, were at least principled in manner. And the first and foremost one was we wanted to make sure that the health and safety of our students, our faculty, and our staff were paramount. And that's how we drove all those decisions and why we moved to an online environment. The second principle, though, is really about ensuring that the students have an incredible quality educational experience. And we wanted to ensure that that wasn't lost as we made these changes. Third, as many of you know, we made a decision to move to a pass-fail option, and that was driven by the principle of equity and ensuring our role and responsibilities around the public good. The fourth principle is really about ensuring the long-term sustainability of this university. It's over 150 years old. It's going to be around for another 150 years. And then finally, importantly, I think, we will do everything we can to support the livelihood of our faculty and staff as best as we can. Now, even with all those principles, there were some decisions that were not as popular as some, and certainly unpopular with some people as well. But one of the things that I think I'm really proud about this university is what we've done to help students who are most negatively impacted by the crisis. Our Student Assistance Fund, which has been around, suddenly saw a very large uptick in the amount of money, thanks to donors and friends of the university that have made a number of very large contributions, including our board of trustees. So we have over $100,000 now in our fund that has been helping students in the greatest need. We are distributing about grants in about $500 for students that can use them for books or packing and storage fees, computer use. We're just making sure also that our students don't go hungry. So the food insecure students in particular have benefited from the use of our Student Assistance Fund. I'm very proud of that, and I think it's gone over extraordinarily well. Now, over the course of the last several weeks, we've been fielding a number of emails and phone calls and meetings, and there are some themes that rise to the surface in all this. And some of these themes are what we're going to explore in today's town hall meeting. So let me just describe a little bit of them. First of all is the physical and well-being of all of us during the coronavirus crisis here. And I think one of the questions behind that is, how can we stay connected to others, emotionally engaged, and really managing our fears and staying resilient? So that's one thing. Another thing, though, is really about teaching and learning. You know, how are our faculty adjusting? How are our students adjusting to this new format? We do want to maintain equity and ensure that our dedication to the public good does not pause during this crisis. So we're exploring what differences do we need to acknowledge across the curriculum and across population groups. How can we be aware of any kind of inequities, and what can we do to mitigate those inequities, especially during this time? What does the campus culture and engagement look like for faculty, staff, and students? I'm seeing an increase in these webinars and morning dance sessions, and these are great and wonderful. And are there other things that we can be doing to pull our campus forward? And the last question is the one that I'm particularly interested in, that I hear a lot of. How will this change DU going forward? So we're going to explore some of these questions over the next few moments. But first, I'd like to have the panelists just spend a couple of minutes talking very broadly about their experiences, personally or at the university, and how it has impacted them. And I'd like to start with Ann DePrince first. Ann?
Thank you. Thanks for the chance to be with you today and think about some of these issues together. I think reflecting on how life has changed over the last few weeks, I notice a lot of uncertainty and the stress that goes with that. A lot of new routines, from how I shop to how I work, but also having to accept that some days routines aren't actually part of the routine. So a new sort of flexibility for which is challenging for a person such as myself. I've been surprised at the amount of connection in some ways, despite not being physically near other people. Connections with friends and neighbors, and checking in on one another, and how powerful that's been. I've noticed a lot of awareness about the ways that my privilege plays out, my access to high-speed internet, when the digital divide is affecting families and children and how people are learning. My own supportive marriage at a time when, as the Chancellor alluded to, lots of women and children are experiencing increases in abuse. So I'm very aware of the roof over my head and the food on my table. And I've also noticed since this started a tremendous amount of gratitude and inspiration. I have been so powerfully moved by my colleagues across campus, students, people pitching in, sharing ideas, being creative, supporting one another. I hope we get to talk today about a community table and what our Cecil team has done to really try to create connection points. And I see that in my colleagues in psychology, Office of Teaching and Learning. And so I just have this tremendous gratitude at the same time.
Great. Anne, thank you. Alex, let's hear from you.
Hi, thank you for having me here today. Myself, like everyone else on this panel and everyone attending, obviously has been affected in many ways. With me being on the soccer team, we were supposed to be going to Germany over spring break, and that got canceled because of this coronavirus. And so then when we found that out, found out we could still be on campus training. And so that was still like a plus. And then it went to completely isolation back at home. And so now I'm home in Kansas City, and having that like complete separation has been a huge impact on my life, and as well as other athletes. We're trying to find new ways to cope with this new reality. But one of the things that I think gets us really just through it is having that connection and bond, and still being able to talk to each other every day, whether it's on a team phone call, just a couple guys, you just reach out to them, and just dealing with the new norm is something that we're really having to deal with. And I think Anne mentioned it, having routines and structures, and that is something that we have found as really beneficial and helpful for us. And I think there's another aspect of it, as we really have talked about it within our team, of having these certain goals of just really being the best person you can be every day and being the best version of yourself. That kind of comes from, I've learned over the years that it's come from being a leader of yourself first, and being a positive role model and leader within your own community, whether that be your immediate family, those around you. Like for me, it's my soccer family, or like being a positive role model in the DU community as a whole. And so these are things we've been working on as a team to really be able to get through this together and come out on the other side and be ready for our season to go in the fall as if nothing's happened.
That's awesome. I can hear, snippets of the coaching philosophy that Coach Jamie Franks has brought to the men's soccer team. So we're going to explore that a little bit more later, Alex. Thank you. Mary, how's the experience affecting you?
Hi, yeah, I want to say thank you for everyone who's here, and thank you for having me. For me, I think I've really tried to focus on just mental health and being really kind to myself and being as kind to others as I can. I've been trying to, like it's been mentioned, like routine has been very difficult for me to keep up, and I'm trying not to pressure myself to follow something and create more stress than is already looming over all of us. I've also really appreciated my work with PLP and the Cultural Center, that I've been able to still stay involved, and I'm programming events where I'm attending events, and it is kind of mandatory, which is nice, because I think if it wasn't, I don't know if I would push myself to attend more events. And especially because I get to program them, I get to like have in mind, like, what might I like? Oh, we should think about this. And I think that's been really helpful. With family, I'm living alone at the moment, so that's been a kind of difficult thing of like a couple weeks, just me. But we've been like FaceTiming. We actually did a paint FaceTime thing. My mom did her garden. My grandpa was painting. My brothers were all doing their own thing. So we're definitely finding new ways to be connected and definitely strengthening relationships. I think that's been one of the better pieces of this. Even though I can't see family or hug them, we're definitely spending more time talking and just figuring out what really moves us and makes us want to get up every morning. So it's been like exercising, or one day it'll be art, or the next day it'll be like, I really want to do my homework, because it's a really good distraction. So it's just been kind of up and down, trying to figure out what works.
Awesome. A lot of resilience in your answer there, from the well-being component to routines and really family and community of the PLP, the family. It's funny, just last night, my family got all on Zoom, and we had a lovely time seeing each other together like that. So we'll have to try that painting session. I think that's quite clever on your part. Nikki Latino, how about you? How's been the pandemic from your angle?
Thank you for having me today. I'm glad to be here. You know, as I've been reflecting on my own experiences and talking to others, this idea of keeping hope in mind has been really helpful. And I turned hope into an acronym to help me as I process the reflections. So H is about health and well-being for ourselves and others. And I, like so many others, have family members and friends with underlying health conditions that make them more vulnerable to the virus. So really understanding our shared responsibility in protecting each other and the fear that comes with that, and using facts to help address the fear and really understand what we're trying to do. O has been about opportunities for meaningful connections. I miss the vibrancy of being on campus with our students and staff and those collisions that we're meant to have. And so really being intentional about making that a priority to have those meaningful connections with family, friends, colleagues, and students. P is about perspective. It's helped me to put in perspective the magnitude and the complexity of this pandemic, and that while we have more information today than we had yesterday, there's still so much uncertainty that we'll continue to navigate. So how do we take it a step at a time and come together to address that? And then E has been about in expanding my own capabilities with technology, as I'm getting used to all the multiple systems and being on multiple Zoom meetings with video chats coming in at the same time, but also thinking about how we can expand our capabilities through technology as we become even more innovative with the student experience. So as I've been navigating day to day, trying to create new routines and balance, it's been helpful for me to keep hope in mind.
Nice. Hope. Okay, so health, opportunity, perspective, and expanding, right? Very nice. I like that. All right, Tom Romero, let's close it up with you. What has been your experiences like?
Well, thank you. It's great to be here and great to be with such a distinguished group of fellow panelists. I first just want to give a big thank you to all the facilities and maintenance staff, the essential workers. Hopefully some of you are on here that have made the campus still continue to operate. Certainly all the staff that work behind the scenes to make us as faculty or administrators look really, really good as we've made this transition. So a big thank you and shout out to them. It was 3 months ago, on January 20th, I was actually in Japan, sitting in front of a whole bunch of food trucks that were serving Indian food, Thai food, pizza, Cuban food, and this was the day before the first confirmed case of coronavirus happened in the United States. And of course, in China, it was just starting to really emerge and grow in Wuhan. And these were friends I was sitting with who had just moved to China about 8 months prior. And they're educators, and as they have sort of tracked this from 3 months ago, as they have gone to, as soon as they returned back to China, being in shelter in place, having temperature checks, certainly tracking, certainly going to online learning, I've been able to live vicariously, in a sense, through them. So I want to say very quickly, there is a light at the end of the tunnel to some extent. They are kind of getting back to normal. They're going to restaurants, they're going to cafes. They haven't moved back to in-person learning, even though there's a plan to physically distant type of learning that's taking place. But as foreigners, they've experienced a tremendous amount of discrimination. People won't let them into certain sorts of places. They've actually been spit at places. And so what that makes me think about is just really thinking of the luck and the privilege that I have right now in this moment to have financial security, certainly to have my health, my family's health, in this age, internet security, right, access. So just wanted to being thoughtful and reflective, this experience, it's a worldwide experience, and having friends, family all over the world that are impacted by this has made me think of my luck and my privilege.
Tom, that's great. And thank you for acknowledging all the staff, the facilities, the custodians, and especially who are essential personnel who have been working on campus. They have just done an amazing job while they've been here. And of course, we put them in that role, and it's challenging, as you can kind of imagine. So thank you for that. And of course, all of you, the sense of gratitude that you express, I think, is heartwarming in all of this. So I think that's a great way to get us started in our little dialogue. I'm going to start now just with a few peppering questions here to our panelists, and then we'll open it up to some of the questions that we will have received from the folks out there. I'm going to start with Mary, and kind of picking up on Tom's theme of really being, I guess, aware and empathetic about the advantages and privileges that he has, that all of us have right now because of our status. But we know that not all of our students are experiencing this digital learning in the exact same way. And so, Mary, I guess I'm curious of you know, from your perspective, what are you hearing, or what are you thinking of as a leader of the University of Denver's Joint Council that represents so many of our affinity groups, and whether or not those students, you know, because of a variety of different backgrounds that they have, or their ethnic and socioeconomic status, are experiencing this in a much different way. What can you share with us?
Well, I can't say that I'm certain of all of their experiences. I don't think we've done, it's a little difficult to also, when people are having more difficulty in situations, to maybe get that information. Not everyone wants to be open to that degree. But I think from the experiences I have had, especially with faculty and teachers, that I have 3 classes this quarter. So my 3 teachers have been very considerate in that they've done anonymous polls to say what things might you be dealing with, and then they've provided resources generally to the class and not targeted any one individual to make them feel singled out. I think that's really, really important, and just trying to be as thoughtful as you can when handling the situation. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how students can reciprocate that to faculty, because I think a lot of times we forget that they may also be dealing with similar situations. And so I think it's just going to be a lot of us being really considerate of one another and doing our best to extend grace. I know one of my teachers has no due date on assignments because she really wants us to not feel rushed or like we can't accomplish anything, and that was before the pass or fail was put out. So I think that's been really important. I know other students are considering within Joint Council of pass or fail is great, and they're really happy that you can make that decision towards the end of the quarter, because some of them might do well and that those grades might improve their GPA. So I think just like having a lot of options for a lot of different types of people is really, really good, and I appreciate that we're doing that so far.
Nice. So consideration, it's really being thoughtful, and anything we can do to kind of eliminate the anxiety and the stress that is inherent in this new system. That's very helpful. Thank you. I'm going to turn to Alex. So Alex, you in your first kind of remarks, you talked about you know, some of the disappointments that this has brought in as a Division I athlete, and of course what your colleagues in other sports are doing. I'm curious, you know, how are you continuing to train in an environment like this? You don't have access to the Ritchie gym and facilities there. So talk to us a little bit about that. And you're a finance major, then, you know, what changes are you seeing in your classes as well?
So to start off with the athletics part, it is affecting me a little bit differently, because in February, I actually broke my ankle in one of our practices.
Ouch.
And so I've been coming back from injury with rehab. And so that for me has been a little different, because I haven't been able to go to the Ritchie Center every day, meet one-on-one with our athletic trainer and work on the rehab. It's had to come from me, having to do like my own rehab, teaching myself how to rewalk and everything again, still being able to communicate with my trainer, but not being able to have that physical contact. But then as well with our team, what we've been doing is we've been having virtual Zoom meetings like we are now, where we just like start the workouts together, and we're like, all right, well, we can stretch together. We can't do everything on this screen together, but if just having it on and being able to talk to each other has been very helpful. I know a lot of people have been doing that and joining the sessions, and even separate from that, we have our workout packets, and sometimes I just FaceTime one of my friends on the team and we'll just do what we can together. And so that's how as much as we can do to keep it normal as much as possible. And then from the classes and school side, I've had lots of teachers. I find it a lot more, the responsibility is on me as a student now to either reach out to my professors and do the work in advance, and paying a lot more attention to the syllabuses and keeping up to date on what's going on. And now that we are in what we are, it's just on us to kind of learn what ways work for us with this new system. And I think this pass or fail has helped a lot. One of the things that we've talked about with our soccer team, how like grateful we are of it, but how that shouldn't affect our mindset and approach going into the class, because we want to get the good grades still and try and learn. Because one of the things we've had is we've had the top Division I men's soccer team GPA in the country 3 of the past 4 years. And that's something we're still chasing again this year. And we're in a great position, but we need a strong spring quarter to finish it out. And so it's not really affecting the way we want our mindset going into these classes. We still want to attack them and get our A's.
It's great. It's great guidance. You can see the discipline that's inherent in the training you do as an athlete now being applied to this kind of unusual circumstance that we have in. Thanks. Nikki Latino. So, you know, one of the things that I think is really challenging in an online virtual environment right now, because we can put our classes online and we can engage students in that way, but more broadly, you know, how do we really keep engaging students outside the classroom, you know, much like we did when they were physically on campus? How do we make sure that there's a sense of belonging still that students feel to the university? So I wonder if you could tell us what CLE is doing to kind of sustain that kind of level of engagement. What are the cool things that CLE is putting forward?
Yes. Well, I am so proud of our division. We have very creative programmers, and as well as partnering with campus partners. And so we have a programming council, and the programming council is comprised of every department within CLE, as well as campus partners, including athletics, international and student scholar services, just a variety of partners, to create a holistic experience for students and different pathways of community. So we still have all of the services that we provide to students in person. They're all online and remote. So there's weekly individual support, there's group support. There are opportunities for students to be creative in what it is that they're doing. So some of it is TikTok, dance-a-thons. They're having Netflix, streaming Netflix movies and having movie reviews on Instagram. They're doing quarantine cravings and cooking together. They're doing health and wellness, yoga with mindfulness that's involved. And so there's a lot of information that's part of the Pulse, which is the weekly newsletter going out to our undergraduate students, the Grad, which has these events in it for our graduate student newsletters. We have information on our online 1DU Canvas module. And so we've also partnered with Alumni Engagement who are using the hashtag DU Connected. So we're starting to promote our virtual programming with the hashtag DU Connected. So anyone doing programming out there, let's get behind the hashtag to do that. But we have identity-based support and programming through the Cultural Center, through Veteran Services, our Access and Transition group. Students are doing podcasts. So we have a whole array of different opportunities for students to get involved and to come up with new ideas that they'd like to see us be involved with.
Are you seeing, you know, is there anyone that you have done yourself that you really have thought was a really wonderful example of that kind of engagement?
I'm wanting to jump in on the dance-a-thons with TikTok because dancing, I love to dance. I'm not sure how good I will be. But no, I've heard from students that the Netflix streaming and some of the wellness and fitness classes that are being streamed by DU Athletics. There's just a lot going on that they're enjoying right now.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you. Okay, let's turn to Ann DePrince. And Ann, as you talked a little bit earlier, you wanted to dive into the community table. So this is a good chance for you. Cecil is our hub on campus for DU to collaborate and foster partnerships with the community. So help us understand how these partnerships are continuing despite this physical distancing that we're having to do. And how are you engaging the students experientially now in this new environment?
Yeah, great questions. And, you know, I think one of the most important things to remember is that community engagement is not necessarily community-based. That community engagement is about building collaboration with people in a way that's mutually beneficial between the university and the community. And so we're seeing really creative ways that people are continuing their engagement, shifting projects that might have happened in person to this remote world that we're living in right now, keeping an eye on mutuality, on there still being reciprocity. So for example, my colleague Kara Dieno has reworked a class on school-based civic engagement where she's partnering with Denver Public Schools, who aren't currently open either physically, as well as folks from CLE and DU Service and Change, DUSK, the student organization, and they're all working together around a remote version of the Day of Action to introduce families to higher education and are part of our university's important pathways to higher ed access kind of programming. And then of course, A Community Table is our signature DU Grand Challenges event where we invite everybody in the DU and larger community to join together and have conversations about what is our future together? How should we be collaborating and working together? And this year, the Cecil team with many others across campus really moved mountains to move what was an in-person event to this remote environment. So A Community Table is now a quarter-long program where we each can host conversations, pull people together from DU and the larger community, family, friends, and have conversations about our theme this year, which is so timely. The theme is, how can we take action together? So whether you're excited that it's Earth Week and care about sustainability, or are part of We Can Do Better and care about gender violence, or homelessness, any number of issues, you can host a conversation where you get people thinking about what's blocking our action, how could we take steps forward together collaboratively. And then the ideas that you generate you share them back with the DU Grand Challenges group so that we can help create action steps for the university to take forward. So it's a great way to stay connected and a terrific example of DU ingenuity, of taking this opportunity where we could have felt silenced and isolated to say, we're going to still have these important conversations because the work hasn't ended. There are still problems that we need to collaborate to solve together.
Yeah, I think this pandemic has really brought to the surface, right, this notion that there are still grand challenges, big problems, and it's showing us new ones, I think, in our whole systems here. It's quite fascinating. The work you're doing is just terrific, and we couldn't be more proud of all the grand challenges work. So thank you for that as well. And oh, one last thing, Ann, you mentioned the Day of Action. Is that a specific day coming up for us, or?
Yeah, so the students through the civic-based class, as well as CLE and others on campus, will be preparing. It will be a particular day where families are invited to take part in the virtual programming to learn more about pathways to college. And then that content will also be available for families to access through a website at their own time. So we're trying, like many classes on campus, trying to model both synchronous and asynchronous opportunities for engagement.
Great, thank you, thank you. All right, Tom Romero, one of the things that you helped me understand really quickly is the huge health disparity that this virus is having on populations, certain populations, populations of color in particular. I know this is your research on issues of racial equality in Colorado. Share a little bit with us about some of the impacts that the coronavirus here in Denver is having and across the state.
Yeah, well, thank you. So many of you may have been tracking in the news because a lot more has been coming out. The Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment has started to publish the data impacting or talking in particular about the fact that coronavirus, COVID-19, has had a disparate racial impact on our most vulnerable communities. And of course, this is something that those that are involved in the issues of racial and social justice have long known about, and particularly in the healthcare field about the social determinants of health. So issues such as access to employment, access to housing, educational access, all of these have made certain communities, in particular communities of color in Colorado and throughout the nation, extremely vulnerable to the coronavirus. So here in Colorado, for instance, the numbers track. The group with sort of the highest proportion of coronavirus confirmed cases as well as deaths is Latinx peoples. In places like Detroit, Michigan, Georgia, New York, African American and Black communities have the highest percentage. In rural America, we're seeing indigenous communities that are being really hit hard as well with coronavirus. And in each of these instances, what sort of compounds the issue is the lack of access to healthcare, distrust of the system. If there is access to healthcare, you might be talking about 1 or 2 critical beds, right, ICU beds, as opposed to 100 or 1,000 in other sorts of places. So, and this is certainly an issue that it just sort of reinforces. And one of the things that I've been thinking about and talking about is it puts attention again to the fact that we are a society, right, that is divided and unequal, and really understanding the history and the different forces that are tied to that are extremely important. And I think some of the work that Anne is doing with Cecil, I think at DU, certainly with the Institute of iRise, I think what this moment is telling us is that this is giving us even greater incentive for institutions like the University of Denver to be engaged with these issues, to be thinking about and working with communities about how we respond to these issues. And part of what I think is really important here as well is this is not just in terms of crisis, right? Not just in terms of responding to crisis, but building long-term relationships so we can prevent crises in the future.
Yeah, thank you. You know, as you were talking, I was reminded of you know, our diversity summit way back in January, but the speakers that we had about community activism in order to address some of these inequity issues that we face is what, you know, is now even more important given the light of this pandemic and the effects that it has unequally across our society in that one. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I'm going to go to this last question because it's one that I'm particularly interested in, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but I want to tap your creative juices. You're thinking about it, and that really is, how will DU be different going forward? I can't imagine that this isn't going to have at least some medium to long-term changes for the university, and I'm just curious of how you're thinking these changes are going to manifest themselves. So who would like to go first with that question? Oh, Nikki, there we go.
I'm just thinking in terms of the creativeness and the innovation that we have used technology to do with, whether it's engagement inside of the classroom or outside the classroom, and opportunities to continue to look at the capabilities so that when we are able to come back together, how can we use technology to help with even more of a holistic, inclusive, and innovative approach, universally designed and giving different pathways that technology, that what we're learning right now with technology can help us when we're back together again as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Who else? Who else would like to chime in? How will DU be different?
I think right now it's really interesting, the innovation, like Nikki Latino was saying, the innovation that we're seeing is really interesting. And I think a lot of things that people didn't think were feasible in our university are obviously now feasible. Working from home, planning events remotely, and having people like Zoom in. We did a watch party with the Cultural Center yesterday for Insecure, and we just watched it on Zoom. So I think a lot of programming will change in terms of access. I think we might be a little bit more cognizant, especially as issues of disparate access are more apparent. I think during times like this, people are seeing a lot more about it. People might be a little bit more conscious in the way that they plan events and who can actually attend them and what resources are used. And I think also a lot of students might want to attend events a little bit more. I think people may not have realized that there was so much community on campus, and then seeing groups like PLP, Joint Council, the Cultural Center, and all the other groups on campus come together in these times, like Alex is talking about, his team is coming together. I think people might want that sense of community a little bit more. So hopefully it'll definitely build stronger relationships and make our campus a little bit more united. I also hope that a lot of the movements that have started to create more equality and equity on campus get a little bit more attention now that people have more time to devote to those issues. And I also hope that the students leading those issues are getting all the support that they need in like already really difficult time.
Yeah, what I've been impressed by is the coherence of our students and our faculty really around various different issues that they've faced and how they brought this up to the attention of administration. I think it's incredibly healthy so that we really are on top of what all the many challenges that our students and faculty are facing and staff are facing in that regard. Thank you. Well, how about one more? Anyone else want to weigh in on how will DU be different? And then we'll take some questions from the audience.
I'll jump in really quickly. Just to reiterate, or just to give a second to what Mary said, I was thinking many of the same things. I think it's going to force us to rethink what community is. But I think from a teaching standpoint, and something that I've been thinking a lot of, is the way that this sudden shift, and I saw it with my colleagues at the law school who one day were teaching online or in-person classes, and then were told they had a weekend to shift to online learning. What I've seen from many of my colleagues in the law school is a great deal of empathy about the shared enterprise of learning and of education and of pedagogy. And I want to say, I think when we've come together as a faculty, we've probably had some of our most empathetic, collegial, and thoughtful conversations about how we deliver education, not just in times of crisis, but also at all moments. So I'm certainly hoping from the faculty side that this gives us time and opportunity to pause and reflect about how we engage with our students, how we effectively deliver content, how we can be creative in reaching very different types of learners with very different types of access to resources. And so that's my hope, at least, that's how campus is going to change.
You know, Tom, I was so impressed by the Sturm College of Law because it was one of the first colleges of law in the country to decide that a pass-fail system was very appropriate for the students who were thrust into an online environment. I know that there are a number of law schools out there that haven't done that, but the Sturm College of Law was right up in the front on that. So kudos to you and your faculty on that. All right, here's a question from the audience. And this one I'm gonna let Nikki handle here. It's how many students are living on campus right now in the residence halls, and how are we supporting them?
We have less than 200 students living on campus right now, including some of our RAs. And we are programming both within the residence halls and also engaging them through what is happening with the Programming Council and the more holistic programming that's happening as well.
Great, thank you. I'm going to circle back to Ann and Tom on this next one. And Tom, it kind of picks up what you were just saying just a few minutes ago. But here's a question from the audience. What strategies are faculty engaged in to be responsive to creating adaptability to other kinds of undergraduate learners. What do you think, what are you hearing out there of how we're adapting to some of these neurodiverse learners that we have here at the University of Denver?
I can say that what we're seeing, for example, in my home department in psychology is faculty trying to think about delivering content both synchronously and asynchronously to try to be responsive to learning environments where students may be at home with lots of family members and lots of draws on the internet or on laptops and computers. So they're trying to be flexible, but also provide enough structure for students to have clear expectations. I think one of the things to know about what's happening behind the scenes with the faculty is the degree to which it's sort of all hands on deck, that faculty are really reaching out to consult with one another. A colleague of mine in my department, Daniel Storage, he had happened to put together a brown bag on remote learning before this all unfolded, and he's made lots of resources available and consulted within and outside the department. And I know that that's happening across campus. So lots of us are turning to one another to problem solve, to think about creative strategies so that we didn't just get flexible that weekend that Sturm College got told to change everything, or when that rolled out for everyone else. But it's this constant iteration that I hope is coming through to students because faculty behind the scenes are working really hard at that kind of iteration and refinement.
Thank you. I've been really fortunate to have some great conversations with a variety of different groups of students, and one of the memorable ones was with the Undergraduate Student Executive Committee. So it's about 9 of our students that are engaged in leadership. And I asked the question, how are you liking the online environment? Which do you prefer? They have 4 or 5 different classes. And so it was fascinating to hear which ones really liked asynchronous learning, which ones really liked the Zoom, the interactive, the synchronous learning at that regard. So it was kind of split evenly when I kind of surveyed that group. And that's just a small sample of that diversity that we have of learners in so many different ways. Tom, I don't know if you were going to add at all to that conversation. I saw you. Okay, you're good. You're good on this one. Well, we have just a few more minutes. I'm going to try to answer a couple of questions here because I think they're on everybody's mind. People are wondering about when are we going to know about commencement? When are we going to know about summer school? When are we going to know about the fall, what it looks like? So let me try to address a couple of these all at once because I think they are really important. First of all, I want to really express deep, deep gratitude for the campus in not just, of course, making the changes to online learning, but also making the changes to our operations so that we could manage and curtail some of the financial impacts that these decisions have had on the university. So right away, I want to say that the university for this fiscal year is in great shape. We have managed a very sizable loss in revenue against a very sizable recovery of some of the expenses when we asked the campus to freeze on hiring, to cut back on expenses, and to curtail unessential capital projects. So the rest of the impact is really managed through our reserves that we very carefully set aside throughout our years. So I'm very pleased with the fact that fiscal year 20 is in really great shape, and kudos to our financial teams for staying on top of that as well. In terms of commencement and in terms of summer school, deciding when we have to go, if we have to go online, I think it's important to put the premise out here that I would really love us to be back face-to-face in some capacity. So my first assumption is we're going to try to be face-to-face no matter what we do. But and remember the principle of health and safety. That is the #1 guiding principle as we make decisions on that regard. So we've set May 15th as the last date by which we would decide if we are going to cancel commencement or have some form of commencement. It's also the date that we will finally decide about, do we have to switch to completely online in the summer? Now, I will tell you that 80% of our summer courses are already online. And many of those courses that are online, we're aggregating at the start of the summer, because that is when we still don't have a lot of certainty of when some of the stay-at-home guidelines will be lifted. We are trying to have some of our face-to-face classes that are lab-oriented, so that students can still have those opportunities. And those will tend to be offered towards the end of the summer, when it gives us a little bit more time to get ready for those kinds of offerings in that regard. So May 15th is the date we've set aside to make some of those decisions. What about the fall? Well, same story. I would really like to see our class of 2024 be here physically on campus. We're about to open up the Dimone Family Residential Village, which is going to be a stunning area where community is the focus. I'd love to see our students experience that. Our community commons will open up in January, a brand new student union that will be the nexus of our social interactions, the face-to-face interactions. And of course, the Burwell Center for Career Achievement will open up in August, another nexus for the engagement of students, alumni, and staff to help discuss career development of our students. We really want our students back here, face-to-face. On top of all that, our faculty do such a fabulous job working with students. I often talk about that first year seminar and how powerful it is for building student-faculty interactions in that regard. But we know enough that we know enough that we don't know a lot. So the question is, when will we make this call that if we have to abandon a face-to-face in the fall quarter, when will that be? Well, we've set aside July 15th in order for us to really get as much data and as much information to really watch the trends, to understand, is the virus receding? Will there be another resurgence of the virus? And I think waiting until that long will enable us to gather enough information to really make an informed decision at that time. Now, we are also making preparations for a lot of different scenarios that could happen in the fall. So in a few days, you will get an announcement from me about a new university-wide planning framework. These will consist of task force that are dedicated to look at very specific issues of the coronavirus crisis that we're certainly in. So for example, we'll have a committee on fall logistics, not just to decide when and if we have to go online, but also what will fall look like? How will we manage a de-densification, which is the new word out there? How will we make sure that people are maintaining physical distances even at that moment in time? So there will be a group that will looking at that. There will be a group looking at various different scenarios regarding enrollments, because we know that many students are having second thoughts about attending college right now. They may take a gap year. Some students may decide to stay closer at home. So we want to be prepared for some of these scenarios. So we'll be putting together committees. But we also want a committee that will be forward thinking, right? Because in a crisis, you know that it's important to come out stronger than when you came into it. And how can we become stronger? What do we really need to think about? How will DU really change in the future? So there will be an announcement that will specify how we can engage a wider audience. And of course, communication will be a big theme on this. Now, we're at the end of our hour, and I just want to thank, of course, our panelists. So well done, everyone. And I want to particularly thank the participants who joined us today. It was absolutely terrific that you were there with us. You asked a lot of questions, and I'm sorry we couldn't get to them, but I am committed to answering your questions, and so we'll make sure that we send out an email to you, or we'll do some frequently asked question sheets so that the whole campus can see what was on everybody's mind. I think that's really important because we're all in this together. We know that there are still challenges ahead. We have learned so much about ourselves from what has happened already. But because we are a wonderful community, because we have this rich history as an institution of resilience, we're going to get through this, and we're going to demonstrate grace and character along the way. I know because I've already seen it in so many of all of you. So all of you, thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next town hall meeting. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.